All right. So today we are joined, or I am joined by Ken Conte. He is the owner and founder of Ancestral Hunting. He started this company a couple years ago during COVID, I believe, right?
It was just after. Yeah, it was
Just
just
after
after.
COVID. Okay. And
Yep.
his goal with this is to take someone who's never hunted before, very extremely new to hunting, show them the whole preparation process, show them the hunting process, and then show them the butchering and the eating process. So you really take someone from never hunting to doing the whole process themselves. First things first, why don't we just start off, introduce yourself a little bit more than what I just did, and
Yeah.
we'll kind of go into a few questions that I've got for you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, thanks for having me on, Rob. I really appreciate it. One of the things that I've realized over the years is there really is a thirst for people who have never hunted before, learning how to do it. And so it came from personal experience. I was a late onset hunter. I didn't have anybody in my family that hunted, but I spent a lot of time in the woods as a kid and as an adult as well, and was actually for many years of my life, from about age, I think, 16 until my late 30s, was a vegetarian. And it was, yeah, you probably didn't even know that, but yeah, I was planning on being a veterinarian. That was my, for sure, that's what my life goal was. And worked in veterinary hospitals from the time I was 13 until I was 18. Came out to CSU to go to pre-vet, and ended up not being particularly good at science, so, which is important to being a veterinarian, apparently. And so fast forward to one of my really good friends, college buddies, who was really into hunting. And he had the benefit of some great mentors in Wisconsin, and then up in Alaska as well. He lived up there. And I didn't really understand it. I was like, what do you do? Like, it seemed so, for lack of a better word, like savage, being somebody who didn't eat meat. And I say that, like, but I did eat fish, and, like, so it was kind of it was a little bit of a gray area. But what I found was, the more I talked to him about it, the more I became intrigued by his philosophy and, like, what he was really out there doing, and the reason behind what he was doing. And so he took me under his wing about, judging from my preference points, about 15 years ago, took me out for the first time, and we went out. I was like, oh, this is what's been missing. Like, like, I got out there, and I was like, I felt so alive, and also had this, like, youthful energy within me. When you used to go and play, like, hide and seek in the woods, or you used to play army or whatever it was like, it felt like that. And it just, like, brought up this kind of youthful energy in me. We started hunting together. He was there when I harvested my first animal, a deer up in Wyoming, a white-tailed doe. And I look back on it now and I'm like, wow, did I get lucky? I mean, whitetail, not full run, but I mean, definitely on the move in front of me. I was standing, shouldered my rifle, and just happened to make a good shot on it, right? Like, I would never tell my students to do that, but happened to make a good shot on it, and, like, everything changed from there. Also understood, like, how difficult it was, because it had been probably, I think that was my third year hunting that I'd actually harvested an animal. And so fast forward from there to my friend mentor, like, one of my best friends, him getting sick. He got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called stiff man syndrome. He had basically would go to the hospital several times a year. They didn't know what was wrong with him, and it debilitated him to the point where he couldn't hunt anymore. And so it was really, like, sad for me, because I lost my mentor and my hunting buddy. And also, like, I wanted to figure out a way to help get him back into it in some way or another. His name's Mark, and he is a master educator. And I actually went up to the land that I harvested my first deer on, and was talking to the landowner, and he's like, "Man, I love what you do. You come up here, like, you really respect the animals, you respect the land. I wish there were more people that came up here and do what you do." And I said, actually, I've had this idea kind of in the back of my head. I tried to launch it in a very different way, kind of doing like a faux hunt, and it just didn't work. We were going to do, like, stations and, like, hundreds of people, and it was not, it didn't work out. And that was actually right before COVID. And I said, but I got this idea to do a hunting school, would you be open to that? And he said, yeah, why don't you send me something? And so I spent that time, that week up there. I would hunt in the morning, hunt in the evening, and then that entire day I would spend working on this business plan. By the time I was done, I had a business plan. Part of my journey has been I joined Fit for Service with Aubrey Marcus 3 years ago, and really got a lot of encouragement there. And actually, that was where I found a lot of my first students. Was men specifically who
Mhm.
really wanted to be closer to their food and wanted to do it in a good way. Yeah, we had our first cohort. We're in our third cohort now, and we had our first cohort and had a really good success rate. And really, and maybe you've experienced this, but you get in that flow and you're like, oh, this is what I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the only thing that I'm meant to be doing, but I am meant to be doing this. And that first cohort, that was exactly how it felt. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm home. Like
Yeah.
this feels awesome.
With the first cohort, like what have you learned from that first cohort to now? Because this is your third year doing it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, one of the things was in the beginning, we actually used to lend people rifles. We would rent them a rifle for $1 and they would go through kind of a rifle renting process. And if people want to be hunters, they need to have their own firearm and they need to be 100% comfortable and confident with it. And so even people that feel very confident with various firearms, they need to have their own firearm. And so that's like a non-negotiable anymore. And then the other piece is fitness. The other piece really like that has become really obvious to me is there are two things that will really detract from the experience and their opportunity to be successful, which I don't, when I say that, I don't mean harvesting an animal, but feel confident out in the field. And one is marksmanship, right? Which goes with having your own firearm and knowing how to use it and using it effectively. And then number two is if you don't have the fitness level to be able to get out there and get up early in the morning and go hike a bunch of miles, sometimes at altitude, it's going to be a real detriment, to you and also to others in the group. And so we've really made that a priority as well, is that physical fitness piece.
It's really hard to replicate what you do in the mountain, especially on a backpack trip or on a day hunting trip where you're hunting day after day after day after day. It's hard to replicate that in civilian life, like in everyday life with the gym and all that. But I mean, you're right. Training and getting as prepared as you possibly can, it can make the experience either very fun or not very fun at all, and the most miserable thing that you'll ever do, and probably never do it again.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think even, now it's June, right? And so my requirement for everyone now is they have to get out 1 day a week and either hike or walk. Like, I don't care how long it is, because for some people, they just don't have the fitness right now. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's okay, because it's June. And, most of like, we have one in October, one in November, and December and January. And so I'm like, okay, we're a few months out, but now is the time to start building that base. Now is the time to start moving those muscles that you maybe aren't aware of, that you're going to need to use over and over and over and over again, day after day.
You touched on, and this wasn't even a question. This kind of just came up through this conversation that you and I are having right now. But you touched on that there's a requirement for them to have their own firearm. I'm guessing archery equipment. Do you have any tips as far as like someone who's new, because you like this is who you work with? What should someone who's new to the hunting side of things or new to the firearm side of things, if they've done archery, what should they be looking for in a firearm?
So we actually do not do archery.
Okay.
We yeah, we are, that is a whole nother level. It is what I love to do, but I am not yeah, I'm not going down that road at this point. I'm hoping in the future we can. But just getting people out there with a firearm to harvest their first animal is difficult enough. And so my biggest piece with that, and I've seen people use everything from a 300 Win Mag to, a 270 and a 223, and I'm like, my opinion is it's what you feel most comfortable shooting is what you are going to be most effective with, because I mean, last year I saw a guy take down an elk with a 270. If we're hunting deer, antelope, I'm like, go shoot a bunch of different rifles, see what feels comfortable to you. And I have people, come at me with all sorts of ideas of what they think are the right things. And so I try to guide them. And that's part of what we offer is a real, for lack of a better word, like a concierge service, right? Where I'm like, hey, if you got questions about your boots, about your rifle, about binos, about whatever, like just message me. Like I'm happy to chime in. It doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm happy to chime in.
Hunt preparation. You touched on the physical side of things, the physical prep, clothing, logistical. What are the two most common mistakes, or most common mistakes that you see new hunters make, like with the cohorts that you've seen, either like not the right clothing, not the right physical preparation, logistically, like are they panicking with flying with coolers and not flying with coolers? Like what are the two most common things that you see?
Yeah, so I think that there's two, and we really try to kind of cut them off at the pass. We've got a proprietary online curriculum that we run everybody through, right? And there's quizzes at the end of every unit, and we also take them through my favorite book, Meat Eater's Guide, right? To hunting,
Yep.
hunting, butchering, and cooking wild game. So we go through that. We have a lot of activities that we have them go through and that they have to do in groups and that they have to watch videos. And so there's a lot, we try to kind of mitigate a lot of those, but the biggest one is comfortable footwear and making sure, and it's something that we are really adamant about, that they don't just go out and buy a new pair of boots the week before they come out, and that they have adequate, footwear. And then the other thing is, I kind of I was a little soft at first around having hunting specific equipment, right? And I was like, hey, whatever you have that's warm. And so people took that to heart, and I had people coming out in full like North Face snow gear, right? They were walking through the woods like and
Right.
so I've gotten a little more specific now around like, hey, if there's gear that you need, like, and I have a lot, I have enough to lend, not for, because most of the time, the most amount of people we have go out is six, right? And so I have enough to go around unless somebody is like a much larger or smaller size than me, that I can usually get people in stuff. But I think having hunting specific gear, because as well as anyone, right, that there is something to be said for having pants that are water repellent, don't make a lot of noise, will keep you warm. Like there's a lot of things that go into hunting specific gear. And so I think that's one of the pieces. And the other thing that I've realized is like a lot of people don't like to get up early in the morning. Like they don't realize when I say like, no, we're getting up at 5 in the morning and we're out the door at 6 o'clock. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, or whatever the time frame is in terms of sunrise. Like we leave people behind. Like we're going. So peace out. If you want to sleep, cool. Like I'll go and try to wake you up once, but like you're an adult and you're paying for this. So yeah. So they have to be, they have to be adults around it. Like I'm.
I never even thought of that as far as it being an issue with getting up early in the morning. I mean, so I forget that some people are not morning people that get up at 4 or 5 in the morning to work out before work. Like,
Exactly,
you're talking
exactly.
about getting up at 5 and out the door by 6. Like that should be pretty easy. It's a good point,
Yeah.
and that's something that they can practice too at home. Is just move up the alarm 15 minutes for
Yeah.
a month and a half before you got to go, and
Yeah.
that just gets you ready. And same like with the time changes too, because I'm sure that messes with folks if they're coming from back east, like out on the Eastern time,
Yeah.
like that's a 2 hour change. So that can be pretty significant for somebody. But yeah, that's a good point. That
And
they're not
usually
morning.
it's right during daylight savings as well. Like usually that's when like usually we're out either the week before or the week after, so like that cohort specifically, like it just kind of messes with people. But we have such a small window during the day, at that time of year in November, it's like, man, we gotta like we got to be
Yeah.
out there while it's still dark, for sure. If we really want to try to, maximize our time out there.
Hunting tactic wise, what is something that you find yourself repeating over and over and over again to each cohort as far as tactics, whether it's mapping, land navigation, how to stalk, anything like that?
It's, a lot of what you're talking about are like advanced things. So and it all comes down to like, do you know how to walk through the woods? Right? Like that is such a, you don't realize, right? When you take new hunters out, you realize most people don't know how to walk through the woods without just thrashing around and like stepping on every stick, and like hitting every branch and all the things, having shells in their pocket that are like clacking back and forth. It's like, here's some tips. And so we really try to go over that kind of the night before, and let people know how to walk, and there are like specific techniques that are used, like, the fox walk, is like one that like goes back for, years and years and years, where it's like, toe heel, toe heel, toe here, or heel toe. But if you're just like clomping down, you're gonna cause a lot more noise. And so, it's really fun, a few people that actually have some experience, and I'm like, oh, this is so great, like you actually know how to walk through the woods. But it's a skill, it is for sure.
It definitely is. Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up because both of the guys that I went out hunting with last year, tromping through the woods. And I would be either leading like where we're going, or I'd be the caller in the back. More often than not, I'm the caller in the back because it was their first time elk hunting. It was only my second. So it's not like I'm leading with a ton of experience. And I could hear
Yeah.
those guys tromping through the woods and just shaking my head like, there's no way. We're not, this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
By the end of the trip, and you probably see this too, but by the end of the trip, you see a change in someone's ability to navigate the woods and to get around. Like you learn so much just by taking. It's like snowboarding too, or
Yeah.
skiing. You pick up any new sport. If you do it like once or twice on the weekends, you're a weekend warrior. You're going to learn some. But if you take a trip and do 5 to 7 days of that, you're going to learn so much in that 5 to 7 days that your learning curve, I think, is shortened a little bit, in my opinion, anyway.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I think it allows you to, like, it opens you up to other opportunities. So I had a student of mine who came out, he actually did the first cohort and was not did not harvest an animal. He came out last year and harvested his first elk, and that was amazing to see. And I was just texting with him, and I was like, "What are you up to?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going on a hunting trip in the Amazon." And he's hunting pacas, and because he's from Brazil, and he's hunting pacas and crocodiles. And I was like, did we prepare you for that? Like, and I just thought through my head, I was like, yeah, kind of. Like without the experience that he's had previously, I don't think he would have, been like, oh, this is something that I want to do, and then he went on to say like, oh yeah, I was actually at a farm that was like a family friend, and we ended up, harvesting a cow and a chicken, and I got to help him process it. And it was really interesting being able to like draw on the experiences that I learned with you guys that he wouldn't have necessarily had. And so those are the kind of things that I like to hear. Like that's what we want people doing, is like going out in the world on their own. But more often than not, they just keep coming back because we make it easy for them. We make it a lot easier than just normal life. But there's something to be said for being there when somebody harvests their first animal as well. Like it's a really, I don't want to say that I like it more than going out and hunting on my own, but it's right there. It's like neck and neck with it, to see somebody like be successful and be respecting that animal and the land and kind of everything that goes in it, and also be inquisitive about like, okay, what do I do next? Like I have no idea what I'm doing here, even though we've been through all the kind of scenarios, and like this is where you start, and this is it, everything kind of goes out the window until you've got, an animal in front of you, and it's like, oh, okay, now what?
Right
you
now, I
know
got to apply what I learned in the classroom.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Speaking of that, with an animal being down, butchering mistakes or butchering tips, because I seem to be going past like the things that you talk about, because you're bringing up some very good things on the questions that I ask.
I think so. I think one of the things people overlook is having the right tools for the job. And so we make sure that we provide them with the right tools for the job. So all of our hunters get kind of a variety of knives, and we require that they come with a sharpener and we show them how to sharpen their knives. But I think so many people go out there with, and I think that there's something to be said for like a Havalon or whatever, with the disposable blades and that sort of thing. But I don't know, the environmental side of me is just like, why? Like, what are we doing? Like I just feel like, look, we can sharpen a blade here pretty quickly. And so really having the right tools for the job, I think it's paramount. And then I think the other piece is, and that it's something that we teach that I'm really proud of, is finding those cuts that a lot of people just take for granted, whether it's the tongue, or the liver, or, finding ways to use the shanks, all the things that, cheek meat, like there's so many parts and pieces to an animal that we can utilize. And we really try to teach them how to do that. And whether they carry that forward or not is really up to them. I mean, last year we were taking brains out of animals to brain tan hides. And so, we had the hacksaw there cutting out the square and pulling the brains out and, putting them in a Ziploc for later so we could, tan hides. And we did, we had an entire elk hide that got tanned because every animal has exactly, including humans, exactly the right size brain to be able to tan that hide,
You're
whether it's a mouse or an elk.
you're gonna have to walk me through that process. How are you using a brain to tan a hide?
So you're starting to get into some of the skills that I'm not as proficient in, and I have my friend slash coach Mandy Bishop. She is like our tanning expert. She really handles all that, but essentially, you can use a combination of, and there are things that you can use. You can use egg yolks. You can go buy tanning solution, which is like really caustic and pretty gnarly, or you can actually use the brain. And there's a certain component in the brain, it's mostly fat, that you actually make this kind of paste out of the brain and you use that to actually tan the hide. And that's something that's been done for centuries. I have no idea where it came from. I have no idea how they figured it out. But yeah, it's a pretty common practice, but it is like an ancestral skill. And so we try to teach as much of that as possible. We teach like fire by friction. So we sat there, one very cold November night and sat there and showed people how to use a bow drill and start a fire with a bow drill and everything that goes along with that, and kind of the reasoning behind it, and the friction, fire by friction is a pretty fascinating process, and Mandy teaches that as well.
Going back to the knife preference. So you brought up Havalon. Outdoor Edge does the same thing with the disposable
Yeah.
knives. If someone's not going to go with a disposable knife, they're cool sharpening it out in the field. What is a preferred knife? Do you like the collapsible knives? Do you like a fixed blade? What do you like?
Something that feels right in your hand, right? And for some people, and so we kind of go with a mid kind of grade. I think we use a Gerber that we give to everyone, and it's a pretty big, heavy, sturdy knife. It's a little more difficult for skinning. It's not ideal for that, but it works really well, and it also is like super durable. And that for me, that's one of the pieces. And then I actually have. So this is actually a knife that my neighbor actually made the handles. So our elk hunters, hopefully they're not watching because this is their like surprise, but we give them a custom knife. It's small, right? Like it's not huge, but I used this last year for probably 75% of the butchering help that I did. So one of the things that I really like about, this knife in particular, and of course I'm not going to remember what it's called, but having some sort of grip on the blade where I can put my thumb. And so this is like hammered, but having some sort of grip there. Usually it's like serrated. It's got like little grooves in it. But having something there and having something that's hardened steel that you can really sharpen and something easy to clean, right? I mean, that's the other thing is like you get some of these knives and sheaths that are just like a mess. It's like, I'm constantly like putting it back in the sheath to do something else and then pulling it out. And it's like, if it's not some sort of like plastic or whatever, like leather sheaths are a freaking nightmare. They just end up stinking because you're like even if you wipe the blood off, there's always something in there, and then you're sticking it in there and pulling it out.
Going from knives and butchering to home
Yeah.
processing now, what do you recommend as far as processing for anybody that's new to it or has been doing it for a while and they want to bump up their game as far as using more of the animal? What is something that you recommend there?
Yeah. So I think, a lot of it depends on where and how you're hunting, right? If you are 15 miles back, into the backcountry and you get a bull elk and it's going to look a lot different in terms of what you're probably willing and able to haul out as compared to a lot of the hunts we do. All the hunts we do are on private land. Most of them are fairly accessible. Yeah, there's a lot of hiking, but most of the time we can get within a mile of a road, and so it's not typically really strenuous. So I think there's two things there. One is making sure that the meat is, and this only really applies for archery season, but that it's cooled well, right? So making sure that it gets skinned quickly, gutted first, and then skinned. Um, I have not found a time or a place for the gutless method. I know there is a time and a place for it, but I haven't found it yet. I like those organ meats. I love the heart. I think it's one of the best, organs in there. Liver, like I make a mean liver pate, and it's great for you, in terms of
Yeah.
mineral content. Next to smoked oysters, like there's nothing that really, you know, it compares to organ meat, especially from a wild animal. If organ meat turns you off, that's okay. You can still use it and you can put it in with your grind, right? So, like, there's a lot of places out there that people talk about, like primal grind or what, and they basically take all the organs and put it in with front quarter or the hind quarter or wherever it seems appropriate, and then they kind of mix it in there and try to kind of hide the flavor. I don't mind the flavor. I actually like the flavor of liver, and I like the flavor of heart. I don't do a whole lot with the kidneys, and not that I wouldn't, but I think and so for us, we actually take people through the entire process where they're going home with a fully processed, fully packaged, frozen animal that they can bring home and cook. And that is our goal, right? And
Yeah.
to the point where we actually have, Italian sausage recipes, we have breakfast sausage recipes, we have all the spices there, and we do it all, and we help them go through that. So we really take the guesswork out of, and I don't know, if you've ever had this, but I've definitely come home with like a hind corner, a front quarter, and like thrown it in the freezer and then like bring out, a quarter, thaw it out, grind it, get it down. It's like, what are we doing? Like this could have been easily taken care of with, a half a day's work. And then I would have had this, freezer full of meat. And we do encourage people to take home their bones. There are actual federal laws that don't allow that, to take bones across state lines. I don't know if you knew that or not, but so because of chronic wasting disease, it's $1,000 fine for people that want to take home their bones for bone broth. We actually roast them and then throw them in their freezer, and that basically takes care of it. And we usually don't have time to actually make bone broth there. And then anybody that doesn't want to take their bones, I will happily take. I've got quarts and quarts and quarts of bone broth. So
Yeah. So is that with the state line thing? I thought that was just the brain and the spinal cord and the spine and all that. But is it all the bones?
yep. And I can't remember what the actual federal law is, but it's, everything has to be just meat. Yeah. So, and I mean, nobody's going to stop you, right?
No.
That you're gonna fly home with, a front quarter and a hind quarter and a whatever, and like nobody's gonna stop you at TSA and go, "Hey, you can't fly with this." But they could. I think you mentioned something about like traveling with meat, which is always it's an interesting problem. So anything less than an elk, I always put in a insulated Walmart bag, for lack of a better term. And there's way fancier ones out there. But if it's frozen solid, and I just put it in my overhead compartment, like on and you'll get a weird look, like, what is that? And it's like, that's an entire deer, because that's how I flew home from Texas this last year. I got a whitetail buck down there and left the bones with the property owner to make bone broth, and, just brought home the meat. And it was, basically like a grocery bag full of, cuts, and it's not bombs, it's weird, but you're good. So you just want to make sure it's frozen. If it's not frozen, it's you're gonna probably have a problem.
Yeah. What do you have you flown with meat that's not been frozen?
No, I mean, it's not safe. I mean, I don't know, like what, I mean, if you do, it's going to have to go underneath in a cooler with
Yeah.
ice packs,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. That's how. So we flew back. I went up to Alaska in 21 and did a moose hunt up there. I was just along. I was helping my buddy pack out if he got one, and
Yeah.
he killed him the second day. So we packed it out and got flown out on the third day. And then we changed our flights. Like we had a round trip booked. It was supposed to be a 10-day hunt. We were done in 3. So moved our
Hmm.
flights up to like 2 days. We were there. I think we flew up the following Wednesday. So we were there for 5 days total. And the meat, we didn't have access to a freezer, like didn't know anything about it. It snowed in Alaska. So it was cold enough the meat didn't go bad. But the day before the trip, we divvied up the meat. And so the meat that I flew home with was not frozen. So we had to go to the store and grab a cooler, and we had to duct tape it closed and all that. And we had to get it, we got it close to, I think, 100 pounds because that's Alaska's policy. If it's got to be under 100 pounds, you're going to pay an oversized baggage fee. But to fly 100 pounds of moose
Yeah.
meat home for $100, like I'll do that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, which is not typical. Like, I know, we've had hunters, and it's one of the things, that people need to be conscious of. Like, you can go buy like a really fancy, Yeti or Arctic cooler. They weigh 60 pounds already. Like that's like the issue. It's like you might as well go buy a cheap cooler, for $40 and fill it up with meat that's going to take up most of the poundage instead of like a fancy cooler. Because it just doesn't, you end up paying, tons of baggage fees. And there are some airlines that are way better about, oversized baggage and and weight and all that sort of things than others. And it's good to do your research, ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah. Call the airlines; they're more than happy, especially Alaska. Alaska
Yep.
Airlines is used to it.
Yeah, Alaska's a whole different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but call the airline. If you're going to get the answer. So you'll get the answer a lot quicker. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Just like a quick overview of like what we offer, which is, we
Yeah.
do kind of 3 different hunts. We do flagship schools that are deer hunts, and that's up in Wyoming on 6,000 private acres. And then we've got a pronghorn doe hunt that we do here in Colorado. That's also our flagship offering. So those are first time hunters or people who have been out but haven't been successful. And we get probably 50-50 between absolutely new hunters and people who've been out but haven't been successful. And then we have cow elk hunt here in Colorado that's on 60,000 acres, plentiful herd, probably 300 head in there, and about 250 of them are cows. Just an amazing hunt here in Colorado. And so we really try to offer the gamut. And then we'll be moving into having an online only offering as well for people who maybe are interested in learning how to hunt, but maybe don't have the funds to be able to go and actually do a hunt and want to do it on their own. And so we're going to be offering our curriculum online, and then also be doing like half-day seminars, kind of walking people through it. So I would say it's kind of like Hunter Ed 2.0.
As far as getting signed up, is it too late to sign up with you guys now?
Our flagship offerings are sold out, but our elk hunts, we actually have, and I think they'll be releasing the tags, I think in the next few days. And so there's always, tags left over for the unit that we hunt for cow tags because it's a C tag. And so we do have some opportunities for that in December, what, 16th through the 19th, and then January 6th through 9th. And then we have a couple spots in our women only elk hunt. So we'd love to have people come out. If they're into it, they can always just email us, ancestralhunting@gmail.com, and follow us on Instagram and all the things. So
Yeah. You're answering questions that I was going to ask that I didn't have to ask. Right on, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk today and give some advice here, and honestly, some tips that I didn't even think about. I think that was some very good insight as far as what we talked about for people getting into the woods and getting hunting. So,
yeah.
thank you again.
Well, thanks, Rob. Yeah, that was a really fun conversation. I always love talking to people that are interested and curious about hunting and also, have their own experiences. So I really appreciate everything that you do.